Welcome, I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now, Dr. Lawrence Rosenthal, who's chair and lead researcher of the Berkeley Center for Right-Wing Studies and the author of Empire Resentment, How the Populist Revolt Shook America. He has taught at the University of California, Berkeley in the Sociology and Italian Studies Department and was a Fulbright professor at the University of Naples in Italy. Welcome to Background Briefing, Dr. Lawrence Rosenthal.
Thank you.
So we're witnessing the Republican convention just underway, starting today and going through Thursday. Seems to be most of the Trump family are the keynote speakers. So it's very much the Trump convention. But in terms of post-truth America, which you have written about and put in the context of earlier fascist movements, and of course the fascist began after World War I in 1919, out of resentment. And I don't know whether we have an analogy here of the losing wars that America's been engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan, etc., whether there's a similar kind of sense of resentment. But why don't we talk about the empire resentment and how it relates to what we're witnessing tonight and through this week in the Republican convention?
Well, let me just briefly address what you suggested about a parallel to 1919. The parallel is a sense of dispossession, which is what is felt strongly on the populist and then on the kind of extreme white nationalist and kind of militia right. In 1919 in Italy, for example, it was the sense that these people had had a successful war, and yet in Versailles, they felt they were being ripped off from what they should have gotten. And Mussolini was able to organize around that sense of something taken away. Donald Trump's movement is at the heart of it, the emotional heart of it, is a sense of dispossession among what I would call the right-wing populist base of the Republican Party. And that has to do with things that are often widely discussed, which are things like, a sense that other groups who are who are engaged in identity politics, like women, and blacks, and Latinos, and gays, and so forth, are displacing them. The identity movements of minority groups are basically movements which say we are locked out of a seat at the table. We demand a seat at the table. The white identity counter movement, you could call it, is a sense of we have our traditional place at the table, and we are being displaced from that. We are being dispossessed by these newcomers who have values which are not ours. So that's the kind of the sense of dispossession is what connects this back to 1919.
Well, but how does that contrast then with the Democratic Convention, which was very much a celebration of diversity in this country? And of course, what we're seeing now is largely a white party celebrating white nationalism. They got Tim Scott on tonight, Senator Tim Scott, the only black Republican left, I think. But is there a problem here for the Democrats? In other words, when you are the downtrodden and the dispossessed in this country, you basically have good reason to complain. Whereas if you're a part of the Trump party, particularly the plutocrats who've enriched and all the grifters that he's enriched and that dreadful family of his that are all making keynote speeches, they're all doing fine. Is that a problem in terms of them being upbeat, the Republicans? Oh, everything's great. Well, everything's great for you because you've ripped off the country. Whereas the others, the Democrats, everything's not so good, and we got to fix it. In America, isn't there an expression, nice guys finish last? Is there something to be said for the idea that the Republicans are just going to be so upbeat that...
you know, the Republicans are saying that. They're going to be upbeat. These guys were dark. What you're going to see is a convention which is going to tell people, you're going to have to sit in your houses. You know, you're going to be locked down in your houses, not only because these people are following these elites who just want power and don't have any particular knowledge that we don't have. You could call that populist epidemiology, if you'd like. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, the streets are teeming with left-wing radicals, with Black Lives Matters movement people, and quote-unquote Antifa. And your lives are in danger. These people are taking over the streets. If you want to characterize that as a cheerful picture, well, I don't see it that way. And that's going to be essential. That's going to be the real core of the Trump argument. It is merely a doubling down of what he did in 2016. I mean, in 2016, people could say, well, you know, what Trump is saying is that the American working class has been ripped off. Middle class, the middle class deal in America is gone. The working man's deal is gone, and there was a lot of truth to that. And both parties had a lot to do with that. But that wasn't the argument that got people to the polls. That wasn't what you saw when the Trump followers went to his rally after rally after rally. What you saw there was immigrants are snakes, immigrants are insects, immigrants are famously rapists, criminals, they bring drugs. In other words, you know, even in 2016, when there was this, you know, on the surface case about, the white working class, as it were, even that, the electoral oomph behind it was about the fear of these others, immigrants above all. Now we've got a whole big cast of others. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got Antifa. It goes on, and we've got the people telling you have to be locked down. So what you're going to see in I was about to say in Virginia or in North Carolina, but it's not in North Carolina. What you're going to see virtually is a doubling down on that fear. That's what he's got. That's the Trump formula. Trump has always had a formula, and his idea is always to double down on it. And that's what you're going to get. So I don't think you're going to get cheerfulness and happiness. It may appear that way to some people, but the content of what you're going to hear is about, what Trump talked about in his inaugural speech, and he called carnage. You're going to get carnage squared in his State of the Union address. In all of them, he puts people up in the gallery, has them stand up, and says, "This is a person whose child was murdered by illegal immigrants." That's what you're going to get.
So let's turn a little bit towards what you fear in your new book, Dr. Rosenthal, and that is that Viktor Orban's Hungary's dictator's idea of illiberal democracy, which he's perfectly happy to talk about, where they hollow out the safeguards like a free press and a free judiciary, which is pretty much a mirror of the route that Russian President Putin has taken. Putin, of course, being more brazen in his suppression of dissent by poisoning the leading opposition figure in the country, sending out the unmistakable signal that it's not good for your health to oppose me or to investigate corruption. But the key to, as you say, the key to a liberal democracy is a blizzard of information, lies, and distortions poured out daily by the Trump administration as a way to discredit even the idea of a single objective truth. The only final source of truth for the Trump movement are the utterances of Trump himself. And this is the essence of autocracy. So is that what we're going to be witnessing for the next few nights?
Well, yes. I mean, you bring up the question of comparison to Viktor Orban. I think, illiberalism, you can look at it as occurring on a spectrum. And Orban and Putin are way at the end of the spectrum. And in the U.S., there have been a lot of things similar. But the institutional barriers to illiberalism in the USA are considerably greater. We would not have this conversation on radio in Viktor Orban's Hungary. What Viktor Orban has done in the wake of the COVID crisis is he's produced what in Germany in the 1930s was called an enabling act. The enabling act effectively allows Orban to rule by decree. The parliament is, which is what the power given to Hitler after the Reichstag fire. That's one way I think of that is that there are various Rubicons to cross from illiberalism to fascism, and that is one of them. The other most significant one is the use of a dedicated militia. That, during the 2016 Trump campaign, there were a lot of allusions to violence. He would say, knock the crap out of that guy and so forth. But you didn't get organized militias on his behalf. You're beginning to see that in places like Washington, D.C. and Portland. And those people, the people doing that, the guys with no identification on their uniforms, they have been kind of readied for this sort of thing by their work, above all on the southern border, under the offices of the Department of Homeland Security. That's the second major Rubicon to cross. And that one, there's reason to worry about that in this country. The third, there's a kind of minor league, not as serious crossing of the Rubicon, and that one is, one notes that the Republican Party is simply straightforwardly saying we're not going to have a platform. The platform consists of we reject the policies of Obama and Biden, and what we have to say for ourselves is we have an America First agenda. We stand for President Trump's American First agenda with no specification. It's just two very short paragraphs. That is also a kind of element of classic fascism, and suggests that is an element of classic fascism, which is the idea of the leader and the leadership principle. which is to say that the leader has this mystical power that he, and as Trump would say, he alone can interpret the needs of the nation. And Trump now approaches that formally as the head of the Republican Party.
Well, Dr. Lawrence Rosenthal, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I've been speaking with Dr. Lawrence Rosenthal, who's chair and lead researcher of the Berkeley Center for Right-Wing Studies and the author of Empire, Resentment, Populism's Toxic Embrace of Nationalism. And he taught at the University of California, Berkeley in the Sociology and Italian Studies departments and was a Fulbright professor at the University of Naples in Italy. This has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters. I'd like to thank producer Graham Fitzgibbon. This program is available at backgroundbriefing.org, where you can sign up for email updates as well as subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this program, you can help us reach more listeners by taking a moment to rate and review us on iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts. And please do share today's program with friends, family, and colleagues on Twitter and Facebook. To help us sustain our mission, spread the word, and keep us corporate free, we have added a donate button. So if you are in a position to give support, please take a moment and visit backgroundbriefing.org/donate, where your tax-deductible contributions will help us continue to build a reality-based community in post-truth America. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Background Briefing. Bye for now.
Lady dressed in white with a man she loved, standing along the side of the pickup truck. A shot rang out in the night, just when everything seemed right. Another headline written down in America. The guy that lived next door in 305 took the kids to the park and disappeared at 9:30. Who'll ever know how much she loved them so? That dark night alone in America. A quiet voice singing something to me, an angel song about the home of the brave in this land here of the free. One time, one night in America. Four boys playing ball in the parking lot. A preacher, a teacher, and the other became a cop. A car skidded into the rain, making the last little one to say, one more light goes out in the